Alright, I went to Kansas for college today in the Browning Manning, taking private Manning. And I'll try to be quick, only 3 pages, I promise. The past couple of years, citizens of the United States have been the victims of a systematic and devastating weapon of mass distraction. You may have experienced an extra special dose of this as the internet and dinner tables across the land erupted a few nights ago with the good cop, bad cop, my team versus your team spectacle that was the first presidential debate. Little did the majority of the viewing audience know that the Democratic and Republican parties had secretly negotiated a deal that dictated the topics for debate and excluded independent voices. At the same time that this weapon of mass distraction has lured some American public into an illusion of democracy, the story of the last few decades has been largely ignored. 3 years ago, a young private found the courage to do what so few had been able. This private was faced with the unvarnished truths about the way our rulers operate. What Private First Class Manning referred to as perhaps one of the most significant documents of our time, removing the thought of war and revealing the true nature of 21st century asymmetric warfare. Private Manning wanted you to see a video of the U.S. military committing war crimes. Crimes in Iraq, and as well as other information that led to the ouster of all combat troops from Iraq. Manning wanted to know that our government outsources torture, that there is an official policy to violate the UN Convention Against Torture, to ignore evidence of torture, and that we still transfer detainees to regimes that torture. Manning wanted you to know that U.S. officials were told to cover up evidence of child abuse and child trafficking by the defense contractor DynCorp in Afghanistan, a company that receives $2 billion of your tax dollars every year. Manning wanted you to know about Guantanamo. The Guantanamo files describe how detainees were arrested based on highly subjective evidence, and that former U.S. officials created a legal framework that allegedly permitted torture at Guantanamo. Manning wanted you to know that both the Bush and Obama administrations lied about civilian deaths and their dirty wars, even though they maintained publicly that there was no official civilian death count in Iraq and Afghanistan. War logs show that this claim was false. Between 2004 and 2009, the U.S. government counted a total of 109,000 deaths in Iraq, with 66,000 of them classified as non-combatants. This means that for every Iraqi death that is classified as a combatant, 2 innocent men, women, or children are also killed. Manning wanted the Tunisian people to know that despite the U.S. campaign of unwavering public support for President Ben Ali, we would not support their regime in the event of a popular uprising against the corrupt autocratic ruling family. Within 1 month, Ben Ali became the first Arab leader to be swept from power in an ongoing democratic movement in the region. Woo! Manning wanted you to know that Egyptian torturers received training in Quantico, Virginia, that the State Department authorized the theft of the UN Secretary General's DNA, of the Obama administration, a lot of presidents, of the Yemen president, to cover up the secret drone bombing campaign. This is only the tip of the iceberg of what Manning wanted you people to know. For wanting you to know this, and the reality of U.S. global dominance, Manning was subject to what the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture referred to as cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment, and an excessive and prolonged isolation. Treatment that also violates the Convention Against Torture. This included solitary confinement for 23 out of 24 hours every day, being barred from even exercising inside of the cell, constant supervision, monitoring, and strict rules about what goes on inside of the cell, being denied the most basic attributes of civilian imprisonment, such as pillows and sheets, as well as forced nudity. All of this went on under Barack Obama, the man that our people in the country refer to as the lesser of two evils. The constitutional scholar who declared Manning's guilt long before any semblance of a trial. The leader who has used the Espionage Act 6 times to shut down whistleblowers, more than all of the other presidents combined. As activists in the struggle for truth and justice, we must never forget that whatever side you're on, your good cop is still a cop, and the lesser of two evils is still awesomely evil.
Yeah.
That's my last favorite promise. When supporters of the status quo argue that these leaks have done or could do damage, quote them the Executive Order on Classification, Prohibitions, and Limitations, which says, in no case shall information be classified in order to conceal violations of law, inefficiency, or administrative error, prevent embarrassment to a person, organization, or agency, or to prevent or delay the release of information that does not require protection in the interest of national security. or quote them Robert Gates, former Secretary of Defense, when he said, "Is this embarrassing? Yes. Is this awkward? Yes. Consequence for the U.S. foreign policy? I think fairly modest." Let's be clear. This is plain and simply a war on whistleblowers and a war on journalism. I'm wrapping up. You may ask why I'm referring to this person as simply Manning. This is because prior to the arrest, chat logs belonging to Manning were released showing Manning's struggle with gender identity, in which Manning even discussed plans to transition. At the same time, Manning's defense has responded that Brad or Bradley is the best way to refer to their client. Since this could be largely tactical, and because until our hero asserts for themselves how they identify, as activists and advocates for truth, we must stand in solidarity with the transgender community and honor Private Manning's truth. Until they are released from these unjust conditions of forced silence, Private Manning's gender identity will remain just that, private. And in closing, Manning will stand trial on February 4th of next year, close to 3 years after arrest. Manning faces life in prison. Life in prison for, I quote, "wanting people to see the truth regardless of who they are. Because without information, you cannot make informed decisions as a public." Manning's chat logs also read, when asked about an endgame, "God knows what happens now. Hopefully worldwide discussion, debates, and reforms. If not, we're doomed." Part of Manning's hopes have been realized. It is now up to us to see through the broken political system, act independently outside of it, and demand transparency as we struggle for justice, freedom, and equality for all. Thank you. And one more thing, just last week, a generous contributor has pledged to match all donations to the campaign, so please go. Everything that you give will be matched by a generous contributor. Please go to bradleymanning.org. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Bradley Manning. So blowing a whistle on war crimes is not a war crime. Release Bradley Manning now.
Yeah.
He's done our society one hell of a piece of justice by giving us the information like Daniel Ellsberg did with the Pentagon Papers. A free society needs information to make decisions. Government classifies to deny us the right to know. Our next speaker is, she was chosen by Occupy.